Hey, how's the cell coverage in here? I hear the answer to that depends on the carrier. Is that true? Yeah, maybe. Sorry, I couldn't resist. So my name's Pat McLean. I run an organization called Verizon Interactive, which is the interactive marketing organization for Verizon. Imagine that. I got to tell you a little bit about the company first. Many of you may know us as this, and hopefully many of you in the room are our customers. And it's true, we are this. Verizon Wireless is a big part of our organization, 100 million customers, something in that range. And yes, it's true, we are now the other people with an iPhone. I myself am holding out for the 4G version, but it's a great product, so big event for our company over the last little while. So the other thing, though, that maybe some of you, hopefully some of you are aware, but maybe depending on from what part of the country you're in, you might not be aware, that we are also this part of the company, which is the landline business. And the landline business is where I live. And unlike the wireless part of the business, we have some very, very unique challenges. We have a fiber to the home footprint that's branded under the Fios brand that is in kind of the Northeast, Mid-Atlantic, and then some sporadic parts of the country. A few of you may be our customer, hopefully. But it's also an interesting challenge because over the last 4 or 5 years, we've been investing very, very heavily in the fiber footprint. And we've reached a point in the penetration of that marketplace where it's not as easy for us to capture customers anymore. The first 10, 15, 20%, whatever you want to call it, when we enter a space, it was pretty quick for us to get those customers because they were dissatisfied with their cable provider. Something new, a very innovative platform came along, so it was a good opportunity for us to capture share early. It's getting harder and harder and harder. And in addition to us trying to drive this part of our portfolio, a lot of people still also know us as this. People who aren't in our Fios footprint, for example, might just be our phone company. The other thing, too, is that we have, over time, in a lot of ways, reinforced the kind of traditional view of our brand and the traditional way that people think about Verizon. Because, well, first of all, we are the phone company. But we've also been behaving for years and years and years like the phone company. All of our advertising has driven you to phone us. Please, please phone us if you want to buy our products. If you need support, please, please, please call us. And we would be happy to support you and provide whatever service you need. But all that needs to change because, as I mentioned, it's getting harder and harder for us to acquire customers from a Fios perspective, and this business is very rapidly going away. So you can imagine a company that's very traditional in nature. We've got call centers with many, many humans in them that can be very expensive. We have advertising that has, until recently, been very traditional in nature. A lot of TV, a lot of direct mail that's got a phone number attached to it. Please, please call us. All of that, over time, as Fios penetrates even more, our COA has started to climb pretty dramatically. And as our traditional business declines and it's harder and harder for us to grow our Fios business, you might imagine what that does to the financial performance of the telecom unit. And so hence the interactive organization comes in, because a couple of dynamics clearly in the marketplace is that, well, first of all, we're having challenges maintaining the kind of margin and profitability that we need to, and customers are no longer responding to the traditional way in which we market. And so what are we doing about all this? Well, we're in the midst of a substantial business transformation, and what we're doing is we're tying the business transformation that we're making to very much what's happening in the marketplace from a digital perspective. And we're mirroring our own transformation with how our customers want to interact with us and the type of behavior and purchase behavior changes that we've seen in the last little while. And I'm going to tell you about some of the key aspects of that business transformation. I guess I'm kind of the case study on the agenda, and I'm more than happy to be that because we really believe this whole category that is the theme of today's agenda is really at the core of what our strategy is behind this business transformation. So I'm going to talk a lot about that. So the first thing is we know and have come to understand, much like everybody else in this room, that customer behavior has changed really, really dramatically particularly over the last couple of years. E-commerce clearly is growing like crazy. Important for us to make the investments in order to keep up with that dynamic in our industry. In addition, we know that our customers are interacting in social media in a very, very rapidly growing way, and it's becoming a meaningful way in which our brand is being talked about, and a meaningful way where we need to start participating in that conversation in order to make sure that the messaging is consistent with our brand. We also know we're seeing that one of the trends for us that is very important is that customers don't want to work as hard as they used to. And there's this expectation that content is pervasive, that they don't have to go searching for reviews, they don't have to go searching for product information, competitive pricing. They want all that to be intuitive, they want it to be a part of the experience that they have digitally. And that's a pretty important trend that we've found. We also are finding very much that this idea of a seamless experience is becoming real. Mobile is becoming a very real way in which people are interacting with our brand, with our content, with us as an organization. And they're also thinking more and more about the cross-platform from the perspective of, however I interact with you, Verizon, I don't want to have to start again. And so if somebody interacts with us digitally and they wind up for whatever reason in a call center, the relationship and the conversation that we had with them online, they expect it to be a continuation when they interact with us in another channel. And then, of course, there's the dynamic of digital spending, which I think is really more a symptom or an outcome of some of the other things on that list. So this is a value chain that we use at Verizon to very much describe the strategy and the vision that we have for Verizon to become what we call a digital brand. You may still think of us in the context of being the phone company. You may think of us as a wireless provider. You may think of us in the context of Fios. But I guarantee you, if I asked a couple of questions, you would ultimately wind up in telling me that the best way, or the way that we prefer you to interact with us, is still by picking up the phone and calling us. And we need to fundamentally change that in order to maintain the kind of relationship we have with our customers who are now interacting digitally, and for us to continue to have the kind of low-cost productivity that we need to have in order to sustain the business model that we have. So let me just take you through this. So at the very bottom, really a fundamental principle of ours is that we need to start marketing with a digital focus. And what I mean by that is that our chief marketing officer, who's my boss, very much needed to embrace digital in all of the levers of marketing. And so if you think about pricing, one of the things we learned very quickly when we talked to our customers was that they just didn't believe they were getting the best price from us on our website. And so when you've got that barrier and they think, well, maybe if I phone them, I'll get a better deal, then, well, what do you think is going to happen? They're going to visit the website, and then they're going to call in, and that's exactly what was happening. We saw 70 to 75% of our customers, no matter what channel they purchased through, they went to Verizon.com, but we were only closing 8 to 10% of them actually in the e-commerce experience. That's a big problem. It's a big missed opportunity. And one of the big drivers of that was that people said, well, I know I can negotiate a better deal, and they were right. Because we had all of these offers in the background, call center reps could do all kinds of gyrations to get you a better deal. And so that became our mode of operation. Think about call to action. I mentioned this a little bit up front. So we were conditioning customers to phone us because on all of our TV ads, you get a direct mail in your mailbox, and all over that is plastered a 1-800 number. Please call us. And so if you're a customer, and there might be a little URL down there in 6-point font or something like that, but really the phone number was the main thing. So even though we may give you the option to go to Verizon.com, we're telling you that we prefer you to phone us. So we had to just make this shift, this mindset shift of, well, forget about that. If we want them to interact with us digitally, the call to action has to evolve ultimately to a point where that's the dominant call to action. The other one was really to keep up with the digital spend. So we were still spending huge, huge dollars in traditional channels, measuring it in a traditional way. And we were really underperforming and frankly underspending from a digital perspective. So we fixed all that. The other thing that we did was we had to just get our platforms where they needed to be. So we spent a considerable amount of time with the experience level. So just some of the fundamentals, like you go to the website, the navigation, make sure it's clean, make sure the design is representative of the brand, make sure pricing is clear, make sure the product information and the value proposition messaging is clear, make sure you got a good e-commerce experience. So all those fundamentals of what does our shopping cart do, where are people falling out, let's fix all that stuff. So we did that too. We also, from an existing customer perspective, we were just as sporadic and all over the map, so we fixed that. So we took our existing customer portal experience, which was fragmented over 13 or 14 different websites, had different login experience, if you can imagine. We embarked on a major, major effort to do single sign-on, created a single destination for our customers. So myverizon.com now is the one place you go with a single user ID and password to access everything Verizon. Kind of a good idea. So we had to do that before we started to get into some of this more sophisticated kind of digital marketing that we're now getting into, and is now the phase of the strategy and the roadmap that we're on. And it's in this sort of meaty middle of this value chain. And so we're starting to get into this world of what's the role of targeting and personalization for us. And I'm going to talk a lot about that because that is fundamental to the next phase of our strategy. And to go along with that, investing fairly heavily in social media, both from an integration perspective on our own properties, creating some branded communities of our own, but also starting to acknowledge and participate in other social networks in a meaningful way, both from a service perspective and from a messaging and outreach perspective. So that's kind of the phase at which we're at. And then ultimately, once we solve that and we crack some of the art and the science and the strategy behind this personalization, we believe that we can then take that cross-channel. And that, for us, is really where we start to open up the opportunity where every touch point with a customer can ultimately drive to digital. We can have these cross-data opportunities where if somebody initiates in a call center, they can, if they wind back up in the website, the relationship continues, and vice versa. If they start on the website, finish in a call center, we pick up where we left off. But we've got to get the model right in terms of how do we personalize, how do we target, and that's what I'm going to focus on today. Down the side of the value chain here is what I think are kind of the critical pieces. The first is that platforms. So platforms is kind of an overused word, but it really is important that big brands invest in these platforms that matter and that are going to sustain the kind of scalability that you need. We've got 14, 15 million customers. We're selling thousands and thousands of units on the website per day. We need scalable platforms that are able to keep up with the complexity of our business. This one in the middle is really important to me and is fundamental to the personalization discussion, and that is evolve the relationship from one-way linear conversation to an actual conversation. Listen to your customers, react to what they're telling you, use the information that you're giving them, and have a real-time conversation with them in the digital space. And that's becoming more and more possible with the kind of platforms that are available to us from a technology perspective. And then ultimately for Verizon, which is kind of the unique part of our organization, our industry, and our brand, is that for us this is a culture shift. Because if you think about the business and you think about the people who are in the organization, digital does not come naturally to them. And they are very, very used to all of the traditional methods of driving sales, of interacting with customers. And so ultimately, once we build these things out, once we get the strategy aligned, and once we start to have some success in the space, it then becomes about culture change. It becomes about changing incentives. So people aren't driving to a call center because that's how they're That's how they're measured, and that's how they're paid. So that's ultimately what's going to drive us into those cross-channel integration opportunities, and ultimately will turn our enterprise into a digital enterprise and turn the Verizon brand into a digital brand. And so that's the strategy and the value chain that we work with. And this is really, for me, I use this slide a lot with the rest of the executive team, and that is that digital's got to become a part of Verizon's DNA. And you look at the companies on this list, some of them are, I think, fascinating case studies. I love using the example of FedEx. I don't know if there's anybody here from FedEx, but FedEx, you used to call to track your package. There was a time when you used to call to track your package, and there used to be a time when you called, to book somebody from FedEx to come and pick up a package, and you would never think to do that today. At least I wouldn't. And they've undergone that transformation because you think now to go to FedEx.com to track your package. They have changed the mindset of themselves. They've changed the mindset. They've changed their culture, and they've changed your expectations on how to deal with them. Airlines is another great industry. I mean, you would never think now that, boy, if I call the travel agent, I'm going to get a better deal than I'm going to get on, Continental.com or JetBlue.com or even Southwest.com. You think about that brand. I mean, that is now officially, in my view, a pure digital brand. Southwest.com is the company. And so this is the transformation that we're on. It's a very exciting part of my job, is to just evangelize this opportunity. And this is what it looks like. So forget about actual numbers, but you look back in 2009, so we're talking less than a couple years ago, this was our channel mix. And so we had, the red is online, surprise, surprise, so we were doing less than 10% of our sales online. And our goal is, by the end of 2012, to make that 50% of our sales. And so that is the journey we're on. And we've met with some tremendous success as a result of the strategy that I've described. In less than a year, we've already doubled our sales online, and we're on a path to do it again. So it's a very, very important element of the Verizon strategy moving forward, and it's working. So what are the challenges for us next? So I talked through kind of the evolution of the strategy as we see it, and this is really where we are in it, and I think why Verizon's a very good case study for this event, and that is that we really need to accelerate the kind of consumer behavioral changes that that are happening, where people really are changing the way they think about purchasing products and services across all industries, and they're thinking differently about, and they're behaving differently about how they make that decision, how they even decide whether or not they're in their consideration set. And so we've got to figure out a way as a brand to accelerate that from our perspective. We need to continue to increase the productivity of the channel. We've done a terrific job on the platform level, evolving those platforms. We've doubled our close rates from an e-commerce perspective, more than doubled the conversion performance of the traffic that's coming to the site. So all that's very, very good stuff, but we got to do it again. Because if we're going to get to that 50%, half of our sales, we've got to keep going. And we've got to do it in a way that obviously we're maintaining the low-cost value that we're bringing to the organization as a channel. The COA difference between online and some of our other channels is hundreds and hundreds of dollars. And so there's clearly a material benefit to maintain that. And the way we'll do that is by being more and more relevant to customers. And not just more and more relevant to customers in the macro sense, but being more and more relevant to you, and being more and more relevant to you. Related exactly to your particular criteria, how you want to behave, how you want to purchase, where you are, and what your life stage is, and all of the other demographic information that we can collect about you. I'm going to tell you about how we're thinking about that. And this is a great quote that I'll actually read because I think it's pretty powerful. When someone acknowledges us as individuals and personalizes our experience based on our unique characteristics, we feel understood and valued. Our feelings of good will increase, our confidence grows, our tolerance broadens. Personalization casts a powerful spell. And this, for me, is exactly the vision that we have for this next phase of making the experience relevant, making it more productive, and unlocking the next conversion improvement opportunity that we have as an organization. And this may seem simple in a way, but it's really kind of a fundamental overhaul in the way in which .com, whether it's our .com or really any .com works, and that is going from this linear path where all users come in one way, shape, or form, and then they basically go through the same experience, working very, very hard to get the information that is relevant to them, going from homepage into some of the learning sections about products and services and pricing, going through some sort of shop experience, and then ultimately ordering. We send people through in basically the exact same way, no matter who you are, where you are, and how you behave, and that needs to change. And so the way we think about this is creating unique paths for people based on what we call personas, and taking into account a lot of the other demographic and basic data that we can deduce or otherwise get directly from you as a customer. And so ultimately what happens is you can create user segments that make sense and that are material ad nauseum. And maybe ad nauseum is not the right term, but you could create basically multiple versions of your web experience based on whatever rules and criteria you choose to set, and the ones that you set are the ones that are optimized for conversion performance. And that's essentially what we're doing right now. What does it mean? Well, it means that, holy cow, man, things just got really, really complicated. We call this atomic targeting. So if you think about it, I mean, you could basically, drive yourself insane, trying to think, okay, there's geography, we've got footprint, so we've got different pricing in New York than we have in the Washington, D.C. area, so we got to take that into account. People have kind of different flavors of what's important to them in those regions, so that's important too. Your status with us, is this your first visit to the website? Is this your second visit? If it's your second visit, well, then I know in theory what you did in your first visit, and so I can make the second visit much more relevant to you based on what I already know about you from that first visit. What type of customer are you? Are you an existing customer? Do I know that? Are you an acquisition opportunity, or do I know nothing about you? And on the list goes. What kind of products do you qualify for? Are you in my Fios footprint? Are you not? Do you already have some of my products but not the rest of them? All of that can create another series of content iterations as a result of that. What's your life stage? So are you a family? Are you a young adult, et cetera, et cetera? What's your shopping intent? Are you a mover? Are you switching from the cable provider? What can I deduce about you from that perspective? And probably most importantly, and this is the one where we think we're approaching this a little bit differently, and I'm going to go into some detail here, is what's your shopping persona? So how do you like to buy? Are you the kind of person who just, I just want a deal, I'm looking for the best deal? Or are you somebody who, I want to know what everybody else thinks before I make my decision? And what content is relevant to you and what experience would optimize for you is very different depending on what type of persona you embody. And so that's a very important part of our strategy. And then also, ultimately, I can start to deduce, well, what are you passionate about in this category? So are you a sports fan? If you're a sports fan, then I'm going to pull out content relevant to my sports value proposition from a TV perspective. Or does HD matter to you? Or does video on demand, is that a passion point for you? And I can start to bring those further up into the experience depending on what I can tell. So all of this just makes the content management challenge much more significant than it is in the linear model, as you might imagine. Also, operationally, this creates an incredible amount of complexity because now going from a set of 10 to 100 test cases whenever you want to launch a new campaign or a new set of pricing, you now have potentially hundreds of thousands of test cases. But if done well and if the conversion improvement bears out, there's an incredible amount of ROI on this because if you can get it right, you're making the relationship with the customer much more conversational, much more in tune with the way in which they want to purchase from you, and you're making the overall content experience on your website much more relevant. So here's a little bit more detail on the shopping personas. So we did an incredible amount of research with our customers that were either shopping with us or our competitors, or even would consider shopping with us online from in our category. And we really started to drill down into understanding, well, what's a meaningful segmentation from this shopping persona perspective? And here's the 5 that we landed on. I won't give you sort of the whole detail behind what it is, but it's essentially some of the examples that I was using earlier, where there's like this wheeler and dealer category, somebody who wants to kind of negotiate and cut a deal and just wants to know all the pricing. And so, that's a particular type of person, and you can imagine the kind of content that you'd serve up to that kind of person. Then there's the collaborator, so somebody who they're one of multiple decision makers in the home. So obviously a family would, a lot of families would fit into that kind of category. There's kind of the get it done person. There's like, look, I just want to buy. So, get me in there. I want to get Fios installed like tomorrow. So let's just get on with it. So that's a different kind of person. And then there's the methodical person. I'm going to take my sweet time, thank you very much, and I'm going to do all my research, and then maybe I'll make my decision. And then there's the opinion seeker, somebody who's like, well, I got to ask my friends. I'm going to, sort of post my thoughts out on Facebook or Twitter or whatever, and I'm going to get all my friends' feedback and get some more reviews and, sort of seek out other people's opinion on whether or not this is the right choice for me. So this is the way we're approaching it. And it's very unique because what it does is it takes it out of just the pure analytics kind of science of it all. Like, this person's in New York, I can deduce that they're at this life stage, and I can deduce et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What it does is it takes it into a behavioral kind of model, and it starts to make you think not just like an analytical marketer, but also like a strategic marketer. And, well, what is the appropriate message for each of these personas? And when you think about it, the marriage of those two arts and sciences is really, really powerful. And we believe that this is the approach that will get us not just the benefit that comes with good data analytics and acting on that good data analytic and rules that you can create around those analytics, but also putting the art into it and the consumer insight that comes from really good behavioral understanding of what your customers go through when they make a decision related to your products and services. And so this is, I think, a pretty unique approach. So just a couple words on how you get to an operating model for this, because as I mentioned, this is really kind of blowing my organization out of the water, because you used to have a team that would work on different parts of the websites, and they would have different areas of accountability depending on whether they were in the kind of more learn-oriented section or whether or not they were experts in the e-commerce and shopping experience. And so, very kind of traditional setup for managing a web property. But this, this really changes things, because, what you got to do is think much more holistically about customer behavior rather than just the website. And so, this is one model we're working on, and my suspicion is that our thinking on how we operate in this new world is going to change a little bit over time, and we'll figure it out. But for now, this is the way we think about it. The first is that, the data side of our business has really become a critical piece. And so from a, just from a skill set perspective and just from an overall ecosystem of our team perspective, getting this audience data, kind of analytics expertise was important before, but now it's the primary part of how we think. And so that's a big part of how we're going to be operating in the future. And the other is we're trying to work on this. What does a dynamic site kind of infrastructure look like? You got to maintain obviously all of the quality assurance layer and the performance of the property, but we're now into I got to serve up stuff in real time, and I got to serve up something different to a whole bunch of different segments and subsegments, and there's a rules engine involved that's going to continually optimize, and like, how do you do that? And so that's a very important part of how we've aligned our IT organization, because again, we were very much organized. There's a group that works on content management, and there's a group that works on the kind of guts of our e-commerce system and all that kind of stuff. Now it's all together. So at least we've got an organization from an IT and a technology perspective that's with us, and they're all aligned, and accountability is aligned to get this kind of dynamic nature of how we're going to operate in place. And then the last one is really, this kind of adaptive learning mentality where, we can't just think, all right, well, so we have an IT release coming up in June, so we got to figure out what we want in that June release back in March so that we can give them all the requirements in order to build that out. We can't do that anymore. Now it's like, so this is the kind of content configuration that is optimal for attacking this type of persona. And we've learned that that's changed from this to this just in the last little while. So now we've got to figure out a way to adapt what we've got in market in order to reflect that immediate opportunity to improve conversion on that particular audience. And so that's a whole different mindset in terms of content management, website management, and just making change management much more real time than we're used to. And so that's been a big area for us. And really, we've had to have a discipline to be really, really clear on what we're trying to accomplish, and then also match up, back to the platform discussion, match up our analytics strategy, our content management strategy, our rules engine strategy, and really our whole internal kind of web architecture, really get that aligned to match up with those clear business objectives. And ultimately, the way we think about this is that each one of you, as you come to Verizon.com, will have this unique personal web experience, is the way we're starting to talk about it. And that would be whether you're a prospect or whether or not you're a customer of ours. And so personal web is kind of the new mantra for, if you're interacting with Verizon online, it will be in a personal and conversational way. And that's how we've got to think about our next generation operating model. So just, I'll kind of wrap up with a few issues that we're grappling with as we take this journey. By the way, we are also just starting to enter the world of the strategy for this from a media perspective. So I've talked a lot about the website. And the real goal here is that once you've got the set of rules, the personas, and everything optimized from the perspective of, I'm going after this type of customer in this way, the next thing you got to think about is, well, how do I then go find those people? And so then what happens is you need to take the personalized strategy that you've developed for your web experience and extend it out to media. And say, I'm looking for the collaborator, and we know that these messages work for the collaborator in New York City, so media team, go find me collaborators in New York City, and here's the message you should use. And so that's, behind the scenes, we're in kind of the website phase of this. We're working hard now to start to get to a place where media is aligned to those personas and the way we think about this behavioral approach to our marketing. So just a few issues that, I won't go into any depth here, but a lot of this is about transparency. I think this is a real industry issue. There's a balance, obviously, that we need to take between being extremely overt and scaring customers off and being transparent and saying, we're tracking you. Here's how we're tracking you, and here's what we're using it for. We've got to absolutely 100% respect the customer in all way, shape, or form. And so anything that we are doing that's using data needs to absolutely be in a non-personally identifiable way. And we need to have zero tolerance for that. And so that's very much at the heart of what our thinking is, and very much at the heart in terms of the way that we're going to market. And then the last is this idea of validity, and that is, if you're not relevant, or if you say you're going to be more relevant and you don't do a good job, you're actually going to do the inverse of what you intend, which is, you think you know me, but you don't. And so you got to be really careful, I think, not to go too far too quickly, because if you get it wrong, I think you could potentially do more damage than good. And so if I'm trying to serve to you an experience that's supposed to be relevant to you and I'm doing the inverse, the likelihood that you're going to purchase from me is probably even less than when I was just giving you a generic experience. And so we've got to be right, and we've got to take kind of one step at a time and take a disciplined approach to making sure that we are just in a continuous improvement and optimization mode here. And so I think that's an issue and a challenge that we'll continue to have as we move forward. So those were some of the things that I wanted to put on the table, but really happy to share the case study with you. It's been a real exciting journey for me. I joined Verizon a couple years ago in order to take this journey with them. And I'll tell you, it's been a very interesting experience trying to get a traditionally minded company to this place, but I've been extremely impressed with the team and the organization there, that they've really rallied behind it, and we've come a long way really quickly. And the benefits to this as an organization, both financially and I think from a brand perspective, are going to be pretty potent. We're starting to see it. Our NPS scores for anyone who interacts with us online are going steadily up, and they're way better than they are in a lot of our other channels. And so we're just continuing to get validation both from the performance that we're having from a sales perspective, the performance we're having from a financial perspective, and the validation we're getting from customers that we're on the right track here. So it's been a great journey, and it continues. So thank you very much. Yeah.
Any questions for Pat? I think over here.
Yeah, so that's a good question. I mean, what we're trying to do with pricing is more in line with, just being, first of all, really vigilant about having a best price online strategy. So it's not necessarily tied to your persona from a price perspective. It's more tied to what is in the other channels in the geography that you're in, and what the competitive nature of your particular situation is. Said another way, if you're in New York, we have a very aggressive competitor in New York. And so I'm going to price you based on the fact that I know you're in New York. And that's really the criteria we're using based on pricing, not really the persona. It's an interesting concept, but we're certainly not there yet in terms of whether or not I would price differentiate based on whether you are whether you're a collaborator or a wheeler dealer. What I will do, though, is I'll present the pricing differently to you, and I'll present it to you at a different stage in your experience with me. So if I can deduce that you're a wheeler dealer, I'll create a price comparison experience for you that's front and center, right? And I'll make the messaging more related to price comparison than I would if you were somebody who I deduced was a collaborator and was interested in sports. I might not make the pricing as prominent in the experience. I would talk more about my value proposition around sports. Does that make sense? Yeah.
And I added because of the digital transformation, I added a new box. And I found when I phoned the guy, told him my issue, said I don't want to pay any more, and he found me a deal for a digital box where I didn't pay any more for that box.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's hard for me to believe that I could have found that by going online.
Well,
at this
so
point.
So what happened in the background there, this is a great example actually, what happened in the background there is the call center rep has a series of tools at their disposal that's been created by our CRM team that basically says, when you call in, I know who you are, okay? I know what boxes you have, and I can put to the rep a recommendation on what to do with you to, first of all, make you happy and get you that new set-top box at a price that is going to be the best price for you. So we are integrating that set of CRM rules into our web experience. So then if you had gone online and if you had logged in, I now have all of the information that the call center rep has, and the CRM rules engine will feed to you. If you're looking for a set-top box, here's the set of pricing configuration that I can give to you. So that's a great example because, you know, in the background what's happening, I talked about cross-channel integration, is we have a whole kind of Uber strategy, if you will, where we have a master data warehouse. And then as part of that data warehouse, we have all of these rules around if somebody's in this bundle, move them to this bundle if they call in. And we're now taking that universal data warehouse and those set of rules and making them, enabling them online. And that is exactly the kind of mindset shift that we need to make. Because you're right, today if you went online, you'd have to find that offer. And it would be very difficult for you to do that. But when we execute on this kind of data-driven rule set to you, that experience would be better for you online than it would be if you called in. Yeah.
My name is Rich Masterson. Company is Campaign Grid. We do what you do, but for politics. Question I have on cross-channel. You have retail partners. Mm-hmm. I have to believe that there's got to be some tension at the strategic level of what you're doing to optimize online and have a direct experience with the customer versus your retail channel partners. Can you just speak to that a little bit? Yeah,
that's more an issue on wireless than it is in our business. Retail is less of a part of our distribution strategy. It does happen. You know, what we'll do is really it's internal transparency, because one of the biggest things you struggle with is really the channel conflict aspects of, same thing happens with call centers too, is they complain all the time about the pricing that we have online and why can't I get that offer? And that's human nature. But really the key to that is interacting at the most senior levels in everybody. You know, I talked about incentives. It's really about performance management. So every executive at Verizon has my channel mix target. Okay, so the people who are responsible for retail, the people who are responsible for call center, as part of their performance, they're going to be assessed on how successfully we're driving sales to online. And that's the only way you can do it, because otherwise you're forever in a debate and you're forever in this, well, if we just, you know, price that way everywhere, wouldn't we grow the whole pie? It's like, yeah, you would, but you'd price down the whole market. And you wouldn't have accomplished anything at the end of the day other than just price yourself down. It needs to be done strategically so that the goal is shift. And as soon as you get every executive in the company aligned to that, it just works. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you have a different persona for acquisition than
We haven't tackled the persona for existing customers yet. So that's a good question. We don't know if they're the same or they're different. We have that research going on underway right now. The existing customer strategy, I would say, is going to be more driven by what I talked about from a data and CRM perspective, because the more relevant thing to you as an existing customer is what you have now, what you qualify for, and what offer I can afford to give you. And so I would say from an existing customer perspective, the persona strategy won't be as applicable, but will be a component of it. We just haven't done that insight work yet. Yeah. Hey.
What do you think about from a journey perspective to where you were to customer preference optimization, media optimization? Where would you put yourself?
I'd say we're, in terms of time, I would say we're halfway there. In terms of kind of the deliverable, we're probably 30% the way there. So I think that we've done a lot in the first year and a half. We've done a lot of the heavy lifting to get us to a place where we can unlock the opportunity. I think now it's a question of execution and operation, and operationalizing and then optimizing, and so that will happen faster, in my view. Anybody else? Anybody else? Going once, going twice. Look at that, 7 seconds left, it says. That's pretty good, isn't it? Thanks. Thank you very much.